FAIR stands for Factor Analyses of Information Risk, and it represents a fundamentally different approach to cybersecurity risk assessment compared to frameworks like DREAD and STRIDE. While those frameworks help you identify and score threats, FAIR is designed to quantify risk in financial terms that business executives can understand and act upon. FAIR was developed by Jack Jones in the early 2000s, but it didn't gain significant traction until around 2009 when the FAIR Institute was established to promote and standardize the methodology. The framework emerged from a frustration that many cybersecurity professionals shared: the inability to communicate risk in business terms. Too often, security teams would present technical risk assessments that executives couldn't translate into business decisions. FAIR bridges that gap by expressing risk as a probable financial loss over time. The framework has gained substantial momentum in recent years, particularly among large enterprises and organizations that need to justify significant security investments to boards of directors and executive leadership. Companies like Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, and numerous Fortune 500 organizations have adopted FAIR as part of their risk management processes. It's become especially popular in heavily regulated industries, where quantitative risk assessment is required for compliance. Understanding FAIR is increasingly important for cybersecurity professionals who want to advance into leadership roles or work closely with business stakeholders. While it doesn't appear on as many certification exams as DREAD or STRIDE yet, it's starting to show up in risk management certifications and advanced cybersecurity programs. More importantly, FAIR gives you the ability to speak the language of business when discussing security investments and priorities. FAIR differs significantly from other frameworks because it's based on a specific definition of risk as the probable frequency and probable magnitude of future loss. This isn't just a conceptual difference. It fundamentally changes how you approach risk analyses. Instead of asking whether something is high, medium, or low risk, FAIR asks how often something might happen and how much it would cost when it does happen. The framework breaks risk down into two primary components: loss event frequency and loss magnitude. Loss event frequency considers how often a threat actor with sufficient capability will act upon a vulnerability in your environment. Loss magnitude examines the potential impact in financial terms, including both primary losses like direct costs and secondary losses like reputation damage and regulatory fines. Speaking more on how FAIR actually works in practice, the loss event frequency component requires you to analyze threat event frequency, vulnerability, and contact. Threat event frequency looks at how often a threat actor attempts to cause harm to your organization. This isn't just about external attackers. It includes insider threats, accidents, and natural disasters. You're trying to determine the rate at which threats materialize, which requires understanding threat actor motivation, capability, and opportunity. Vulnerability in the FAIR context means the probability that a threat event will result in loss. This goes beyond technical vulnerabilities to include procedural weaknesses, human factors, and control failures. You're essentially asking, given that a threat actor attempts something, what's the likelihood they'll succeed in causing harm? This requires a deep understanding of your existing security controls and their effectiveness. Contact refers to the probability that a threat actor will come into contact with a vulnerability. In the digital world, this might mean whether an attacker can reach a vulnerable service over the network. In the physical world, it might mean whether someone with malicious intent can access a secure facility. Contact is often underestimated, but it's crucial for accurate risk assessment. The loss magnitude side of FAIR considers primary loss and secondary loss factors. Primary loss includes all the immediate, direct costs that result from a loss event. This covers things like asset replacement costs, response and recovery expenses, and productivity losses during downtime. Primary losses are usually easier to quantify because they involve concrete, measurable expenses. Secondary loss encompasses the broader impacts that ripple out from the initial incident. This includes reputation damage that leads to customer loss, regulatory fines, and legal costs, competitive disadvantage from stolen intellectual property, and increased future security costs. Secondary losses are often much larger than primary losses, but are harder to quantify accurately. When you apply FAIR in practice, each component maps to specific analytical activities. For threat event frequency, you research threat intelligence, analyze historical incident data, and assess threat actor capabilities and motivations. For vulnerability assessment, you evaluate control effectiveness through testing, reviews, and gap analyses. For contact analyses, you map attack surfaces and assess exposure levels. For primary loss estimation, you calculate direct costs, including response, recovery, and replacement expenses. And for secondary loss analyses, you model broader business impacts, including reputation effects, regulatory consequences, and strategic implications. One of FAIR's biggest strengths is that it forces you to be explicit about your assumptions and reasoning. Traditional risk assessments often rely on subjective judgments that can't be validated or improved over time. FAIR requires you to document your analytical process, which makes it possible to refine your estimates as you gather more data and learn from actual incidents. The framework also handles uncertainty in a sophisticated way. Rather than producing single-point estimates, FAIR typically uses ranges and probability distributions to represent risk. This acknowledges that we cannot predict the future with perfect accuracy while still providing useful information for decision making. You might determine that a particular risk could result in losses between $2 million and $10 million annually, with the most likely value around $5 million. FAIR integrates well with other cybersecurity frameworks, and many organizations use it as a part of a comprehensive approach. You might use STRIDE to identify threats, DREAD to provide initial prioritization, and then apply FAIR to quantify the business impact of your high priority risks. This combination gives you both comprehensive threat coverage and business relevant risk quantification. It's worth noting that FAIR has some limitations and is not appropriate for every situation. The framework requires significant data collection and analysis, which can be time-consuming and expensive. It works best for major risks that justify the analytical investment, rather than routine operational risks. Additionally, some organizations struggle with the cultural shift required to adopt quantitative risk assessment, particularly if they're used to more intuitive approaches. If you want to learn more about FAIR and develop quantitative risk analysis skills, there are several excellent resources available. The FAIR Institute provides the definitive guidance, including the official FAIR standard and certification programs. Jack Jones's book, Measuring and Managing Information Risk, A FAIR Approach, is the foundational text that explains both the theory and practical application. The Open Group has also published FAIR-related standards that provide implementation guidance. For hands-on experience, consider taking a FAIR certification course, which provides structured training and practical exercises. Many risk management software platforms now include FAIR capabilities, which can help you implement the methodology without building everything from scratch. Some of the leading software platforms that incorporate FAIR methodology include Risk Lens, which was actually founded by Jack Jones himself and is specifically designed around FAIR analyses. ServiceNow's governance, risk, and compliance module includes FAIR risk quantification features. Resolver's risk management platform offers FAIR modeling capabilities alongside traditional risk assessment tools. MetricStream and LogicGate also provide FAIR-enabled risk management solutions that help organizations implement quantitative risk analyses at scale. These platforms typically automate much of the calculation work and provide visualization tools that make it easier to communicate FAIR results to business stakeholders. It's worth clarifying that FAIR is indeed an acronym that stands for Factor Analyses of Information Risk. The name reflects the framework's analytical approach, which breaks risk down into component factors that can be measured and analyzed separately before being combined into an overall risk assessment. The factor analysis part emphasizes that FAIR doesn't treat risk as a monolithic concept, but rather as something that emerges from the interaction of multiple measurable factors. This systematic decomposition is what makes FAIR's quantitative approach possible and distinguishes it from more intuitive risk assessment methods.